Thanks for coming back to Ave Explores Live. It's part of our Ave Explores Faith in Action series over at Ave Maria Press, where we are taking a deep dive look, that's my favorite phrase, into the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, the Catholic social teaching of the church, and really how to put boots on the ground to do the work that Christ invites us to do and really commands us to do. Our first week, we had Father Dennis Stratch, one of the Holy Cross congregation priests, talking kind of 10,000 foot view. What does it mean to actually love people? Last week, we had an incredible conversation with Ike Ndolo and Chika Anyanwu about race and racism and how the church is called to respond to that evil that's in our world. Incredibly powerful conversation. We've had thousands of people go back and watch it. I highly encourage you to check it out. And this week we're joined by one of my dearest friends, Father Agustino Torres, who is up in the New York, New Jersey area. He is a Franciscan Friar of the Renewal. You know them as the Jedi priests. They wear gray. And I'm pretty sure they carry lightsabers. They won't tell you that, but I think I've seen that. Father, you were actually one of my last events that we got. Like the last time I did a youth event was with you before COVID.
South Carolina.
Yeah. That's where I got sick in the car, and you and Jerry were the kindest men in the world and just let me be sick.
Oh, that was such a beautiful event too, wasn't it?
It was good.
Those young people. Shout out to South Carolina people.
Yes, they were on fire. I think that's the last time I got to go to mass too, now that I think about it. Because the following No. I went in an airport chapel on my way to a parish mission. But yeah, that's so strange because I'm pregnant, so I'm not going back until we're at phase 3. So I've been super social distanced. But Father, thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for taking time. Sorry, we could just talk, everybody, and we might. So just say, hang tight, keep tuning in. Father and I have known each other for a number of years, and that's actually how I want to get started tonight, Father. I want to tell my favorite Father Agustino story. So favorite, in fact, that it's in my book. We were in a car in Los Angeles in LA traffic. My husband and I were in the back seat. Father was in the front seat. Our friend Teresa was driving. Shout out to Teresa Mann, who's the greatest chauffeur throughout Los Angeles. So I don't have to drive because LA is it's like Mario Kart. I hate driving in California. So she's safely getting us to this event, City of Saints, hosted by the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. We're stuck in traffic, and this guy starts coming towards our car. And little Katie Prejean from small town, somebody's walking towards my car. I reached over and I locked the door because I didn't know what this guy was going to do. And Father Agustino, who I had met 10 minutes before in the airport drive up, rolls the window down, and you start hanging out the window. And the guy comes over, and you call him over and you start talking with him. You start praying with him. He starts telling you that he's struggling and that he needs money. You give him some money. And for those that don't know, the C.F.R's, you don't carry a ton of cash. You're not flush with cash, but you give him some money and you pray over him. And this man just started speaking a word over you, just calling you a king and calling you an angel and just thanking you and praising God for your existence. And I'm sitting in the back of the car, I locked the door on that guy. And Father Agustino rolled down the window. And what a testament to loving people. And that's the conversation I want to have tonight. How do we love people in challenging circumstances, in surprising circumstances, in moments when things seem fraught and tense in our world, or even just in, I'm in the kitchen and my husband didn't put something back in the cabinets. How can I love him in that moment before I bite his head off because he didn't do what I asked him to do? That's the conversation I want to have tonight. So in order to have that conversation with someone who knows how to do that, Father, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, what you're doing, why you wear a gray Jedi costume.
Absolutely. I wear a Jedi costume because it's a great conversation starter. No, I wear a Franciscan habit because the Lord led me in a crazy way from a small Texas town to New York City. I came up east for school. And back then, the friars were just in the Bronx and in Harlem. And I came into the city for events and came to one of their holy hours that they were doing in Brooklyn. And I was just absolutely fascinated by these grisly looking guys who I'll never forget it. One of them pulled a toothpick out of his beard, and that memory is seared into my brain. And it was just so amazing. Like the young people who were there, like on fire. And it was just like, you're looking at like, this is the Catholic Church that not enough people are seeing. Anyway, after those first few experiences, I began to pray earnestly. What is God asking me to do? One thing led to another. I graduated, worked for a little bit, and joined the C.F.Rs, the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. We were founded in the Bronx when the Bronx was the Bronx's burning Bronx, the late 70s, early 80s. And we were really inspired by Mother Teresa, the founders of my order. We were 8 Capuchin friars who felt just a call in their heart to go back to hands-on work with the poor. It's just like, especially in the Franciscan history, there's periods of where certain Franciscans feel the call to kind of just like go back and to live it like raw. But, we're not in the 13th century anymore. Like, the question, like, do you have chairs? Do you have electricity? So I'd like to, if this is my terminology, the C.F.Rs, we're trying to live as much as we can the Franciscan charism, realizing that the world has changed, that the world is a modern world. So, I mean, for instance, I'm talking to you in a computer right now. It's in an office. It's not in my cell, and we do call them cells. But we beg for our food. I sleep on the floor. I've been wearing the same habit for all of COVID. I'm actually not kidding about that. Actually, I've watched it. So there's perhaps to some people radical ways that we're living, but we see it as a call. And one of those things is to engage in hands-on work with the poor. That's one of the first things St. Francis did. He just went out to the lepers, and we were looking for who the lepers are in our society today. And obviously you can go crazy on that one, but we definitely see the homeless as a population that's just shunned and so in need of God's mercy and love, and the difficult population. One of the brothers, we talk about seeing Christ in the distressing disguise of the poor. That's very Franciscans also. Mother Teresa says the same thing. But like, sometimes you're working with the poor and they curse you out and stuff, and they're like, tipsy or high. And so one brother said, like, well, what do you do when Jesus and the poor like curses you out? Is that something like we figure it out. But it's a blessing to see this, and you see the gospel lived, the gospel in action every day. And so that, in a nutshell, that's my life.
Yeah. What do you do when Jesus cusses you out? I mean, sometimes in prayer, I want to cuss him out, which is not how you should pray all the time, everybody. But, there's anger, fire, but I mean, so let's dig into that. You see Christ in the poor, and Christ tells us, right? He is present to us in the poor. That could be the physically poor. That could be the spiritually poor. What do you do when you encounter somebody who is, and I'll just use the term, impoverished? Like, what's your first reaction?
Yeah, great question. And full disclosure, it kind of depends. I try to read the room, which is something I try to teach the friars how to do. I'm the one that teaches the friars, the novices, our class on working with the poor. It's a charism. Our charism is work with the poor and evangelization. And so I'm kind of like in charge of teaching the new guys how to do this. And I really try to teach them to read the room and to know how to show empathy, but to know and have some discernment points of when we're supposed to be prophetic. Case in point, one of our brothers, Brother Joachim, he's a New Englander. He's like crusty, he'll tell it like it is. And something happened on the block in the Bronx, and we went out to go see cop cars everywhere. We just wanted to go see what was going on. We go over there, and this lady raises the window, very New York scene here, and starts cursing everybody out. And then Brother Joachim just like yells out, "Hey, there's kids over here. Watch the language." And it worked. So there's sometimes, when the impoverished or the people who are in need, need that firmness. And I just say a prayer to the Holy Spirit, it's like, Lord, guide me.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's such tenderness that's needed. It's such kindness that's needed. But I one time a guy broke in to the friary, and I found him. And I was sizing up the situation, and like, it's dark, I'm by myself, it's late at
Mhm.
night, nobody hears me if I scream. We're in a part of the friary where nobody hears me. And so it was a little bit different. Let me just say that. Like, you get like the survival skills kicking in, and I'm just like, you think that's nothing's gonna happen for you being here? Let me tell you something. I start getting like, the
Yeah.
bear in me comes out, right? And so he started getting scared of me. And so, maybe Jesus would have done it differently than that.
I don't know. He flipped tables. I mean,
He did. That's true. That's true. But I mean, by and large, the brothers are known for their kindness, their tenderness. People have come to the door hurting, crying, angry, and the peacefulness. That's what people say when they come into our friaries. Oh, I feel the peace in here. Some like New Age people like, oh my gosh, I feel like an energy here. They go like, so that's
Good
what they
vibes.
say, and it's great, right? We're Franciscans,
Yeah.
and people feel peace when they're around us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think people forget that about Francis. I mean, because you are Franciscan, right? So like, he's either the animal guy or he's the dude that like threw himself in a thorn bush because he wanted to be chased. And it's like, no, there was definitely like an even keeled measurement to what Francis did. And he wasn't just a fly off the handle man. He definitely read the room and knew the situations that he found himself in. Um, we are a very Franciscan family. Our new baby will be named Claire because of Tommy's. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know if you knew that.
Really? That's
Oh
so
yeah, so
beautiful.
we are all about the Francis in this house. But I want to dig into that even more, Father, and talk about so that you encounter somebody that's impoverished, you encounter somebody who needs help, whether that's they come to the friary or you go out to them, and you have an evangelization ministry, Corazon Puro, where you get to, sorry, that was terrible pronunciation of it, but you
No.
get to travel the world and you get to preach. I mean, that's how we know each other. We've done events together for years. Tell me about how you encounter people in that ministry and a little bit about how you got Corazon Puro started and where that came from. I mean, did you just wake up one day and say, I want to hop on planes and go talk to people about Jesus? Or I mean, but you specifically want to go speak to certain people about Jesus.
Yeah. So I was assigned right after I was ordained. I was assigned to the South Bronx, and we're very pro-life, obviously, and we would go every Saturday to the abortion clinics that are just a couple blocks away from our friary. And the South Bronx they're kind of like neck and neck with LA County of the highest abortion rates in our country.
Mm-hmm.
Some hovering around between 40 and 42% of births, almost half, an obscene number. And I remember, I mean, you go there and it's like the cross, man. You wanna practice self-restraint, show up in a Franciscan habit, and people just say the worst possible things you can ever possibly imagine there. It is a horrendous scene. And here these 18, 19, 20-year-old girls are walking in, and I'm seeing them, and I'm like, we're going up to them between 2 and 5 minutes before they go into the abortion clinic. What would it look like if we went 5 and 10 years before? And so my studies were in John Paul II's theology of culture, which includes a lot of theology of the body. It's basically how the gospel touches where we're at. And JP2 was an expert at that. But it also includes other things. It includes labor, it includes social justice. So it's like TLB is like one star in a constellation, in my opinion. But it was definitely where a lot of the young people in the South Bronx were asking questions. And so I started like basically a lecture series, but it had to be engaging, and it had to be put in a way that the youth in the South Bronx were able to understand. Well, lo and behold, we found something there it is like this gaping thirst, this gaping need, this intense thirst that these young people who had grown up in this world, and they were like, there's gotta be something more. And we gave it form. Corazón puro means pure heart in Spanish. We take it from Psalm 51. Create a pure heart in me, O God, and put in me a steadfast spirit. And it was just that. It was just like a whole bunch of young people striving to debunk the lies that society was feeding them, and saying like, no, there's more. And really, we wanted to build families. JP2 said, like, focus on the family, help the family, rebuild the family. Well, the South Bronx, it's an incredible need. What we didn't realize is that figuring out how to do something in the South Bronx is figuring out how to do things in some of the other tougher areas in the world. We got invited to do a retreat in Central America, and oh my gosh, it was like a revolution of young people. And we were just like, whoa, something's happening here. And then we got invited to do it another place. I was just a couple days ago, I was on a Zoom call with Detroit, and they're forming, God willing, a Corazón Puro there. A couple days before that, I was in another Zoom call with another Central American country, and these young people are on fire. It's just like the people who feel like nobody's going to church, and we're the young people, I'm like, come here, I'll show you.
We've seen them, yeah.
And it's really beautiful to see the young people taking ownership. Because this is something also that you're very aware of, that, like sometimes the young people come to the parishes and they're like, well, we want to do stuff, but nobody lets us. But there is a way. That's what I want to tell the young people as well. So I through all this, I just began to give talks, and I would break down the way the talks were, and I'd find ways of engaging the young people, and that began to get invited more and more. And then finally my community said, hey, look, you need to be out there. You need to get out there, and we'll give you the permission. So I got designated a preaching friar. Means that my preaching ministry is going to be the #1 work that I do. And everything else kind of fills in there. So that's kind of like how I started giving talks on the speaking circuit, but it really grew out of the work that we were doing with the young people.
There's something really fascinating about young people being stirred up to want to do the work of social justice. Like I find half the events I normally do in a normal summer are somehow service oriented, work camps or work. The one thing I have on my calendar to actually go to is a work day in Nashville, Tennessee. And it's like, of all the things the parish had to get rid of, they chose to keep this because they want to be able to kind of activate young people. Most of the people that are probably watching this right now are parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles that have young people who've been sitting at home for 5 months, who don't even know what the next school year is going to look like. What would be your advice maybe to even, and this wasn't part of our conversation plan, so it's okay if this is kind of spur of the moment. How do we stir up that desire in the young people that we know to pay attention to the more, or to want to go out and do the work of loving and of serving and of it almost sounds silly to say change the world, but really truly like change the little worlds that we all exist within? What would your advice be?
Yeah, great question. We follow a couple of principles in Corazón Puro, and one of them I did write a book on already, and the one I'm about to tell you, one day when I have some time, I'm going to write a book on this. And it's basically, it's a formula. It's a missionary formula. Event leads to encounter, leads to friendship, leads to community, leads to mission. Okay. So that's kind of like the pathway that we follow to inspire young people to kind of like, get fired up. So an event, it can be anything. It can be a Steubenville. It could be a conversation. It could be a prayer answered. Some sort of event that leads to an encounter with Jesus Christ. But very well, unfortunately, just an encounter with Jesus Christ you can have a fire, but you need a fireplace for it to grow. And the friendship and the community is super important in the young people's life. When they have other young people also modeling some of these things. Parents tell me all the time, like, youth learn from youth more sometimes than they learn from their parents. And so when you have that, and this is where I think some youth ministries can grow, is that it must lead to mission. And when I say mission, I don't mean the young people themselves. I mean, it leads you out. It leads you to the peripheries, like Pope Francis says. It leads you to the outskirts of the world. It leads you to uncomfortable situations. And if I can do that with kids in the South Bronx, kids in Paterson, New Jersey, then I know those are tough. Those are very, very tough inner city areas. We can do it anywhere. So event, encounter, friendship, community, mission. I bring kids to events, and then I say, so how was it? Oh my gosh, it was this, that, the other. It was so amazing. When are we gonna do this again? Hey, connect with these other people. And the young people, the genius of the millennials and the iGens is that they strive, they long for connection, even if it's virtual. So I'm like, okay, even if you guys just form a chat group in WhatsApp, okay, great. You guys are connected. You guys are talking to each other, but that leads to a community. We're going to come pray now, come on out. We're going to do this, that, whatever it is. It's not, the point is that they're coming together. And then I say, okay, guys, we're going to make sandwiches and we're going to go to the homeless. One year when Les Mis was on Broadway, I got rather bold. And I called up the theater and I said, hey, I have a whole bunch of young people in the South Bronx. And so we were doing a missionary formation. There was actually kids from New York, from New Jersey, from Miami, from Detroit. And can you give us a whole bunch of tickets? They gave us a discount on tickets. We went to see the Broadway show. I arranged for the parish that's right by there to open up their parish hall for us. And we had a discussion, and then we made sandwiches and we went out to the homeless right then and there. And the young people were blown away. It was a full day, no lie. People were still dressed up, for their Broadway show. But it was electric to see a fire they got it.
Yeah.
That's how I would answer that question.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there. It sounds like the crux of actually getting to good social justice work, and even that is not a phrase that I love, but I think that kind of encompasses it, is forming those initial relationships with one another, right? The Lord sends us out 2 by 2. We don't go alone. But then also in forming relationships with the people that we help. Father Mark Mary talked about this in his Ave Explores video about this man who came to the shelter who'd never had a birthday party. Nobody had ever made him a cake. Nobody had ever sung him happy birthday, and how just being welcomed into community, even with strangers, kind of saved him and softened his heart. I've seen you do that beautifully in big and small event venues. I think we're doing it now, having this awesome opportunity to converse with hundreds of people watching. I wonder, you in the Bronx and Paterson, New Jersey, in Central America, you get to do it on such a big scale. In such a moving way. How does a person who maybe, we can bring a young person to an event, or we can do the event, or we can start to grow in those relationships with them. What would you encourage them to maybe pray about as they feel that urge to want to bring young people into this work, as they want to begin doing this work themselves? I mean, we can't really do the work of social justice if we're not first in relationship with Christ. And I know you are a man of prayer, so I just kind of feel like maybe there's some wisdom in how we should take this to prayer and what we should ask the Lord for the strength to do.
I love it. I love the question. I would encourage people to pray that they're able to notice the mini miracles, the small things. I got a call from a young adult who I was working with in New York City, and she said, Father, can you do me a favor? What's going on? A friend of mine from college is at Sloan Kettering Hospital, and her son is dying of cancer. Very difficult situation, a 5-year-old boy. They were both Army officers in the Army. their little boy got cancer, and I went over there a couple times, and I was there, just like you just knew that this was the night that it was going to happen, and I just stayed there with them, listening to what they were saying, and I was so blown away by the faith of this mother that said, I know either way. She was saying, I know either way my son's going to get healed. If God chooses to heal him and take away that cancer, he'll be healed. But even if he passes, he's going to heaven. And that is the healing that I was just like, wow, this woman is amazing.
Faith,
but she taught me something. She said, I'm not missing the little miracles along the way. I'm not missing how the Lord is really bringing so many people together from all over the place. There was a hurricane going on of all times. There's a hurricane coming up the Atlantic coast. This little 5-year-old boy loved to watch the Weather Channel. He was such a cute little kid. And the Weather Channel found out about it. They mentioned his name. In a time of a hurricane, they were able to, I don't know if it was FedEx or UPS, but whoever it was needs to advertise this, because they overnighted during a hurricane a jacket that this newscaster had in Florida, and they shipped it to New York in no time. And I'm just like, and the mom is like, I know that's God speaking to us. So I would say, like, we sometimes want to, like, the big things. Oh, I want to, like, be in this, it's the little things. And read the saints that worked with the poor. It's these little things. When you have this sight, this vision of these little things, that's what we should be praying for. Mother Teresa said, to people going to Calcutta, wanting to stay there, and she said, there's a Calcutta in your home. Serve the poor there. And we don't even realize sometimes we go to all these different countries and serve the poor. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. That changed my life. But then we go back home, and a couple streets away from us, there's a family that's in need. And it's not as evident perhaps, but it's there. And when you're able to see the little things, you can notice. And that's what I would ask people to pray for.
Yeah, the eyes, vision, really, to notice what the Lord wants us to notice. Some questions are coming in on the Facebook, and we want to encourage people to drop your questions, and we're going to get to them in the next few minutes. The first one, Father, is from a guy named Matt, and he says, you might have kind of already answered it, but he wants to hear it again. Did you always have a love for the poor, or was that something that was really put into your heart during your discernment, specifically after you met the Franciscans and because you chose this, you didn't choose diocesan priesthood, where you won't necessarily be as confronted with it every day. So where did that come from?
Well, you're about to learn something about me here, Katie.
And all of our friends watching.
So my parents went through something called the 70s. And they were both Catholic, grew up Catholic. My mom, Catholic school all her life. And this whole kind of like, there was all these movements going on, and they got caught up in it, and they left the Catholic Church, and they were very proud members of the Chicano movement, and then they got a little bit more radicalized. I got, this is part of my history, and my mom and dad actually were up in Michigan, and they were reading a lot of socialist stuff. It's kind of crazy to even think about, and I remember growing up, my mom and my dad telling me about the plights of the poor. And I remember hearing their answers. And even as like a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, it's amazing. I was just like, yeah, but there's something more. And eventually, they, like most things, they grew out of it. And my mom had a very, very profound and deep reversion back to the Catholic Church that eventually led, sowed the seeds for my conversion. But from an early age, I was, I guess, given this vision to see the suffering, to see the poor. You might think that, that's not I did have a happy childhood. Okay. We did have Christmas. I guess my parents were the worst socialists in the world, because they would even take us, to church every now and again, allow me to go to my friend's Sunday school. Anyway, but what did happen is I remember that, and I remember, I grew up in Texas, even though there was a couple of years in Michigan, seeing the plight of the poor who were working in the fields, and being. I remember my dad. God bless him. God rest him. I was reading something from my history course, and he said, "Do you think that's what happened? Let's talk about what happened." And he helped me see that there's another point of view. Now you have to be careful with that, but that gave me a hunger to seek for the rest of the story. And this is something that helped me to see not just from the front of the house, but to look what's going on behind those doors. And so that's kind of my story there.
Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, it's not every day that you meet a friar who has a little bit of a socialist upbringing. I
was a cradle atheist
at the same time. I do think it's fascinating, and this is a whole other conversation. The Lord often puts things in front of us, even as kids, that he wants us to pay attention to. Like, I was a book nerd, and now I write. And it's like you were confronted with the realities. I think yours is more important. The realities of suffering, and now you work with the suffering and with the poor. I think it's very easy sometimes for us to think suffering, poor, don't have money, don't have food, don't have a place to live. But there's also that poverty of spirit, that poverty of community, the poverty of just lacking faith. We have a recent high school grad who asked, and I'm looking at the text message of the questions coming through. So how would you best reach out to someone who's drifting away from their faith? And she kind of went into a little bit of detail. She has a friend who hasn't been to mass or doing any of the youth group Zoom stuff. She's reached out to her. She doesn't feel like coming, and she's kind of been ignoring her. And this friend just doesn't seem engaged anymore. But this recent high school grad really wants to engage her friend. So how would you reach out to that person, Father?
Oh, great question. $1 million question. And I think that the answer is that definitely prayer. Do not underestimate the power of prayer. Pray for her. Do a series of prayers for her. What I used to do is, like, when I was praying for an intention, and I would drive by like a certain monument or like a water tower, because in Texas we have water towers. I would say Hail Mary for a person, and that was like a reminder. And I remember one time I said that I was going to say a Divine Mercy Chaplet for a particular intention for 9 days. On the third day, the intention was answered. I was like, whoa. I didn't finish the novena. Maybe I should have, but I was like, job done. Okay, I'm good. Yeah. But don't underestimate the power of prayer, and then know that relationship is the criteria for truth for most people. So what's true? What is truth? Asked Pilate. Well, today, most people equate relationship with something that's true. It's slightly problematic, because it could lead you to hell, but it's also something that we can use. I say it's the chink in the armor of postmodernism. We can go about that a little bit later, but build relationship, authentic relationship. Real quick, I'll tell you a story. There's this wonderful, wonderful, beautiful woman who used to be very active in the church, struggled with same-sex attractions, and she finally called me up one day. She says, "Father, I need to talk to someone." Oh, okay, what's going on? But I don't want to talk to anyone in the church right now. I don't want to hear anything from the church. I don't want to hear anything. I'm like, you do know I'm a Catholic priest, right? And she said, "What? I'm a Catholic priest." She said, "No, you're different." And I had invested so much time in her. I'm convinced that if I needed anything at 3 a.m, this woman would be there. So there's something about this relationship, and it's something to be built. And it's hard, especially when people are like, saying things that are sometimes contrary to our faith. You got to be able to choose your battles if you're trying to infiltrate the system, so to speak. But build an authentic, true relationship. Don't don't give up who you are. Continue to be Catholic, continue to be authentic in that, and they're going to respect you for that. So many of my friends, I had a 25-year reunion for high school. Yes. And so many of my friends who thought like I was crazy, because I had my conversion my senior year of high school. They thought I was crazy when I stopped doing a whole bunch of things. Man, they were all coming up to me at the reunion, asking me for advice and everything. So like, hang in there. Know that what might be happening at senior year of high school is not where this person is going to be at a couple of years down the road, and know that your prayers are going to help them continue to find Jesus.
Yeah, I think sometimes we start from a place of like, oh, I'm gonna preach, I'm gonna proselytize, I'm gonna teach this person, and even persistent invitation doesn't go unnoticed. Even the most hardened of heart, eventually, you wear them down. And they'll just come back to get you off their case, and who knows what the Lord could do in that moment. But also this consistency, right? Like when the person who's left the church, or the person who's run away or who's walked away, does hit a hard moment, and that's oftentimes when we find a moment of reversion, is when there's struggle and when there's strife in our lives. Well, they'll know that you're the person they can call, that you're the person that they can turn to. In that, if you have any more questions, drop them in the com boxes. We're going to start wrapping up in just a minute. But Father, as we do wrap up our time together, I want to ask kind of, this moment in our church, in our world, COVID leading into, I think, necessary conversations that have been happening culturally. There's this real desire for systems and for structures to become more equitable, to become corrected, right, as they should be, right? Justice is giving to the other what is owed to them. And I think it's become very obvious that there are some very unjust things that happen in our world. And I've been hearing from kind of two sides of the Catholic spectrum. The one of, well, I'm not going to engage because that's not for me. That's not the battle I want to fight. And then the other side, which is like, nope, this is something that we all have to fight. And if you're not saying something, if you're not acting, if you're not participating, then you're complicit. And I actually don't think the sides are that far apart, but they'll never turn and actually have a conversation because we're all so entrenched, I think, in the ideologies that we've all espoused. It's a very fancy way of saying, how do we bring together people in these moments and have those hard conversations and build those relationships? I mean, you do this every day in situations with people who oftentimes just need like a stick of deodorant and a hot meal, but like in the process, their entire life can be changed and being given their temporal need. In this moment, when we're talking about race and we're talking about life issues and we're talking about protecting the most vulnerable by doing something simple like wearing a mask, and everybody seems entrenched in their camps. How do we bring the camps together?
There's no simple answer to that, but I do think that we who are followers of Jesus, we need to not be afraid to go to another person's camp. And we need to be missionary in that respect. And perhaps we feel very clear on certain things. Perhaps we don't feel that we need to, but a missionary goes to a foreign land, learns a different language, immerses themselves in another culture because the love of Christ impels them. And I think this is what we need right now. We need to come back to this love of Christ that goes and goes into the deep Amazon to anoint a dying convert, goes into the jungles of Africa, goes into the tundra of Siberia because of the love of the Christ. And I think that the tundra, the jungle, the hinterland that we have are, different neighborhoods, different classes, different backgrounds. And it can almost be easier to go to those crazy places than it is going to the people that are right down the road. and we need to be brave in just like in looking. People say, you know, the word to the wise in New York is don't look anybody in the eye.
Yes.
I I've been looking people straight in the eye. Granted, I look like a Jedi and I'm bald. I look like a Buddhist kung fu monk. But I've been looking people straight in the eye in my neighborhood, and I've just been saying, "You are loved.
Mm.
You know that you are
Mhm.
loved. Blessings to you, peace to you."
Mhm.
And I have only been greeted with goodness.
Mm.
Now, I'm not suggesting that your grandma go, you know, to the South Bronx and start doing that, but I am suggesting that we live that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and it is, and there's no one easy answer. How do you do that? Yeah, you know, take that to prayer, but do it. Live that. Bring that love, be the
Mhm.
missionaries, be the bridge builders, be the
Mhm.
ones not just entrenched in what you believe or what you understand to be correct. Listen and try to understand the other person, even if you're convinced that they're wrong, so that at the end of the day, you can say, well, I really do feel that I've tried to hear you out and tried to listen to you. And
Mhm.
maybe that's all we're doing right now. And that's fine, because if you have 300, 400 years of pain built up in cultures, well, it has to start somewhere.
Mhm.
And I think this is for everybody, all sides. You know, I know there's a lot of people, a lot of our white brothers and sisters are feeling kind of like, I don't know. One of the brothers in my friary said this, like, I don't know exactly how to talk about this. I'm
Mhm.
like, thank you for even saying that. I realize that's the case, but I also realize that a lot of people of color. Um, uh, you know, it's one thing to express anger and rage, but my brothers and sisters, scripture says, do not let the sun set on your anger. And in many ways our anger is leading to a hardness of heart.
Mhm.
And I can say that for everybody, there's a hardness of heart, in, like, you know, just to kind of like, you know, shut the door just because, you know, you're seeing certain behaviors going on. Well, like, you know, we need to be brave and bridge those gaps. And I guess I'm talking over myself now, but that's how I would answer that.
I mean, it's a privilege to say I don't want to have that conversation, when there are so many people who are forced to have that conversation every single day because of the way the world is and the way they're treated. I love that sometimes it just takes listening. Like sometimes it really just takes adopting the posture of God, who always listens to us and doesn't always have a quick, ready response of like, okay, well, I'm going to fix that problem, but sits with us as we talk. Again, even if we know that person might be wrong, or we might not understand their experience, or we might not even fully get where they're coming from because we've never been in that place, there's great value in the listening. I think that segues perfectly into this next question. We'll just take one more after this, Father. It's from somebody who works with a lot with young people. Matt watches every week. Hi, Matt. How can I encourage young people to authentically discern their vocation properly? Lots of young people just automatically assume they're called to marriage instead of giving religious life a chance or thinking about that. So they feel this desire in their heart, but how do I encourage them to do it well?
I just go in there, Matt. I ask young people all the time, you know, hey, so like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, I want to do this, do that, the other. Okay. You hoping to get married? Yeah, yeah. Did you ask God about that? And usually we forget to include God in all of our big
Mhm.
plans. And so I would make it more about that. I would make it about following God's will, not so much being open to one or the other, but like if we're really open to God's will, then that's going to follow. And I obviously, I guess there's a little bit of credibility speaking as a friar, as a C.F.R, but I encounter people all over the place who are discerning, and they even have like a look. And
Mm.
sometimes I go up to them, Katie, and I say, "You've been discerning,
Yeah.
haven't you?" Like, oh my gosh, how did you know? How did you? Like, I can tell. Um, and and it's beautiful because we talk about people who are experiencing, feeling awkward and ostracized. It's like a lot of these young people who are secretly wondering, am I called to be a sister? Am I called to be a priest? They just need encouragement and to not be afraid. A sister at my parish was the first person to ask me, have you ever thought about becoming a priest? And my reaction was like, no, never. And I kind of laughed it off at the time. But let me tell you what, the Lord used those words and planted a seed in my heart. So you never know. You never know.
Yeah. My favorite thing to tell young people about discernment is always what would stretch you and what do you not want to do? And maybe pay attention to that first.
Wow.
That was the advice that was given to me by a Dominican sister who was like, being a nun might be a little too easy for you. You like to read, you like being alone. Kids would be tough. Maybe pay attention to the kids would be tough, and you need to stretch yourself. And it's just, that's like stage 10 of discernment, but figure out where you could be stretched to the margins of your heart. And that might be where the Lord wants you to pay attention. That's not me saying I don't love being married. I'm just saying that's what stretches me. That's what makes me holy.
Yeah, well, it gets young people thinking about it from a different angle, and then that's what we need to start doing. Yeah, good stuff.
I think all of it. I mean, that's really the perfect place I'd like to wrap up. We are called to love people sometimes from a different angle than maybe we wanted to first approach them. When somebody comes into the friary, when somebody shows up at the shelter, when you're out on the road, it's not always the pre-planned moments that are the ones where God shows us himself the most, but it's often in these very subtle, we have to pay attention to people. We have to love them as we see them, not as we were anticipating to see them. And that's perhaps the greatest challenge of ministry. And you're doing it really well, Father. And thank you for sharing about that with us tonight. Where can people find you and help out your mission, both the C.F.Rs and Corazon Puro?
The C.F.Rs, FranciscanFriars.com. Look us up. C.F.R. Franciscans on Instagram. Corazon Puro is corazonpuro.org. And on Instagram, you can follow me on Orale CP, Orale CP. Comes from the Latin for prayer, but it's also a Mexican greeting. Orale CP. And I'm going to be posting something on every Wednesday. So there'll always be something to come back to.
Yeah, for sure. You're a great follow. So everybody, he's been dropping fire every Wednesday, like he said. We'll have all of those links available. This video, of course, will live on Facebook and YouTube and will be posted on IGTV tomorrow. So you can always go back and watch it, share it with your young people, share it with people you know who have young people who want to go out and do good work. This is, of course, all part of our Ave Explorer series for Faith in Action, which is unpacking the social justice mission and principles of the church. You can find all of that content at avemariapress.com. Videos, podcasts, we have more C.F.R. content is hanging out over there from Father Mark Mary. We Swooped Men tomorrow. We have a special episode dropping of our podcast with Sister Agnus Dei, the greatest name ever, from the Sisters of Life. And more stuff coming in the coming weeks, as well as an awesome giveaway with some really cool fair trade stuff that you can get, some coffee from my favorite company, Zaylee Beans Coffee. So go to avemariapress.com, go to the C.F.R. website, follow Father Agustino on Instagram and Twitter, and thank you for joining us tonight. Next week, we'll be back. We can't tell you who our guest is just yet, but you should watch next week. We'll be announcing that later in the week. It's somebody important, and they have to check their schedule because they're, like a shepherd of the church. So we'll let you know. We'll let you know soon. But thanks again for tuning in tonight, and we'll be praying for all.